Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Inside Scoop podcast. I'm your host, Julian Lockhart. We're riding solo dolo today. It's Sunday, August 25th, and it's been a pretty long day. I just got back from the Minnesota State Fair. For State Fair goers, I mean, if you've been to the Minnesota State Fair, one of the greatest state fairs maybe in America. And I was like, you know what? Like, I want to record for a podcast. I've got some stuff to catch up on. Well, our intro for today, I'm going to go over my thoughts on the AP preseason top 25 for college football. The day I'm recording this is Sunday, and there has been a handful of games that were played yesterday, kind of the week zero phase, where the first week one mainly starts next week on Thursday. There's a lot of games to be played then. And I'm a little bit behind schedule. I just got back from Hawaii a few days ago, and I've been very busy with work and conducting a few other interviews for podcasts you may have already seen or are going to see later next week. So we're going to go over the top 25, and I'll kind of run by it and give you my thoughts. And then we're going to go into a schedule dive and predictions for the Minnesota Gophers and the St. Thomas Tommies. Again, this is kind of a Minnesota focus here. Again, born and raised in the good old state of Minnesota, so we're going to focus on the Gophers and the Tommies. But first, let's get into it. So the AP Top 25. Well, the first team, it's going to be the Georgia Bulldogs, which it's hard to argue against the Bulldogs. I mean, you have the best quarterback in college football, in my opinion, Carson Beck, one of the greatest offensive lines, led by Tate Ratledge, who's preseason first-team All-American offensive guard. You have, just some tremendous players on defense, a solid running back, and Trevor Etienne transferring from Florida. It's hard to bet against the Bulldogs, and they have been one of the best, arguably, really the best team of the 2020s. So far. So it's tough to really put them any lower. So we'll see how they do this season. They've got a really tough schedule. So for them to remain number one is, I think, going to be really difficult for them. But if any team's going to do it, it's going to be Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs. Number two, Ohio State. Maybe the greatest team on paper this season. You have Will Howard, where I think it was kind of funny not too long ago. It was announced he was the starting quarterback for Ohio State. And I'm like, he was a top 3, maybe top 5 quarterback transfer, out of Kansas State. And I think he was maybe arguably one of the best quarterbacks in Kansas State history. And I think it was kind of funny that, like, he was kind of having the semi-compete for the starting job. I'm like, they're not going to bring him in and not have him start. So, yeah, he's starting in Ohio State. You have the best running back duo we have seen in a while, Quinshon Judkins transferring from Ole Miss, who is, I think, up there with Ollie Gordon in terms of pure talent. Then you have Travion Henderson, who is already a Big Ten level running back. So the backfield's going to be stacked. Defensively, you have the young, talented star Caleb Downs, who was a true freshman first-team All-American last year for Alabama. I think he's a preseason All-American this year. He'll be one of the best defensive backs. I'm excited to see Ohio State. They have lost the big one the past 3 seasons to Michigan, and that's kind of cost them. Well, I think one year they still made the playoffs in the 4-team format, but that kind of cost them for the past couple seasons of really making any national championship run. So 2 is a good spot for them. Oregon at number 3, which I like. In my personal rankings, I have them at 3 as well. Dylan Gabriel, I'm super stoked about. I think he is the best quarterback in the Big Ten. You have Evan Stewart transferring in, Tez Johnson, maybe the best wide receiver duo in college football. You have one of the better corners, Jabbar Muhammad, on the Ducks. So that's going to be really fun. Ducks offensively are stacked. They've got some fun games, again, coming up. I know they host Ohio State, which is going to be a huge battle, which could determine possibly who makes the Big Ten championship and, who's going to get that first round bye come playoff time. So I'm really excited for the Ducks. They're going to be great. Number 4, Texas. Quinn Ewers, I think, is the second best quarterback in college football. They've had some injuries at running back. I'm pretty sure their number 1 and number 2 running back on the depth chart are out for the season. So they're having to go to, I think, a true freshman, if I'm not mistaken, which I don't think should be too bad. I think they're going to be a pass-first team, but losing your starting top 2 running backs is not good for really any program. So we'll see about Texas. But Calvin Banks, he'll be leading the charge for the offensive line. He was a preseason first-team All-American. Texas is going to be really good. It's going to be fun to watch the Longhorns and see how they do in their first year in the SEC. Alabama comes in at 5, which I'm okay with. Right outside the gate, I think the top 4 is pretty standard. I've seen people rank Oregon over Ohio State, but overall, I think ESPN and the College Football Committee have it right so far. Alabama at 5. Kalen DeBoer, great coach. Jalen Milroe, I'm really excited to see this year. He's a top 5 quarterback in college football. Bama is going to be great. I don't know if they're going to be, this isn't the best Alabama team we've seen before, but definitely top 5. And it's crazy. They're already the 3rd SEC team on this list, and there's plenty more to go. But Alabama at 5, I'm fine with. Ole Miss, I really like at 6. Jackson Dart is a phenomenal quarterback. I think I have him right outside my top 5 list. And Ole Miss, they're looking to go back-to-back 10-win seasons. I definitely think it's going to be difficult for them to win the SEC, but I think they should have no problem making the college football playoffs and having to play a first game. Notre Dame at 7, I'm okay with that. I think personally I have them at 8. And then Penn State comes in at 8 for the official poll, which I kind of have those 2 flip-flop, which I'm fine with. Michigan at number 9. Michigan's a little overrated. I think it's tough to put them inside the top 10. They're one of the teams, if you look at some of the most talented guys in college football, they have Will Johnson, the best cornerback in college football. Mason Graham, the best defensive tackle in college football. Donovan Edwards, a top 5 running back in college football. They have another defensive tackle who I'm spacing out on his name right now, and that makes me sound a little dumb, I know. But they have the best defensive tackle duo, I think, in the country. So, on paper, they've got some great talent. But again, losing J.J. McCarthy, losing Blake Corum, who's been your stud running back for a few seasons now. You lose Jim Harbaugh to the NFL. I think I saw a stat showing that they have lost 60-something% of production from a season ago, which is tough. And again, they were national champions, but I think it's going to be difficult for them to remain in the top 10. So if I had to choose a team that was maybe a little overrated in the top 10, it would be Michigan. Florida State comes in at number 10, which is interesting because, of course, they just played last night. So I'm recording this on Sunday. They just played yesterday, Saturday. They played at Georgia Tech, and they lost. They were upset 24-21, which isn't as surprising. I know the spread was minus 10.5 for Florida State. And for those sports bettors out there, I saw a lot of people taking Georgia Tech plus 10.5. And Georgia Tech, I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to be a great ACC program this year, but I think they're middle of the pack, and they showed it yesterday against Florida State. DJU, the starting quarterback, I know there's kind of been, I think a lot of people are kind of low on him. Just a few years ago, he was the best or second best quarterback prospect out of high school. Didn't do too well at Clemson, transfers, and yet, unfortunately, it was a tough, rough game. It's not going to define their season. I think they're definitely going to bounce back. But it is tough starting the year, especially come playoffs time, with other teams in the ACC competing, like an NC State, a Virginia Tech, a Clemson, right? If it comes down to resume, their schedule, it's not going to look good having a loss against Georgia Tech if you're Florida State. Will they be in the top 25, heading into the official week 1? I would imagine so. But yeah, definitely a tough first loss for Florida State, which realistically for them, I think they were kind of hoping for a pretty easy win there. Number 11, Missouri. I would say I'd put Missouri in the top 10. Brady Cook and And Luther Burden, I think, are going to be kind of an underdog for the best QB wide receiver duo in the country. Pardon me, but I think Brady Cook is not a top 10 quarterback. But Luther Burden is the best wide receiver in football. So I think that holds a lot of weight to it. But Missouri's going to be fun. I'm kind of hoping Mizzou can be in the top 10. I think they've got a real good shot at making the college football playoff. Again, a lot of SEC programs here so far. Utah at 12. I like Utah a lot. I like Cameron Rising at quarterback. I think he's going to have a big year. I think I have him in my top 10 for quarterbacks heading into this season. Utah, I think, will win the Big 12 and should get a first-round bye in the college football playoffs. So I'm excited for them. LSU, I think, is a little overrated. Losing Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, I think Brian Thomas, too, who's on the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think he played for LSU a season ago. They lost a lot of offensive talent. I get you have Will Campbell, the best offensive tackle in college football. They've got some solid defensive players as well. 13 does seem a little high. Clemson at 14. This is the lowest Clemson's been ranked in the preseason poll in a while. I want to say since 2009. I think they were ranked 14. And I think especially after that first loss for Florida State, I think you kind of have to give a slight edge right now to Clemson to win the ACC, which would be huge for them. The Tennessee Volunteers coming at 15. I am completely fine with. 16 Oklahoma. We'll see how the Sooners do. Definitely, it's crazy how they're in the, they just missed the top 15, and we have a large number of SEC teams already that we've talked about. But yeah, Oklahoma 16, 17 Oklahoma State, who I think definitely an underdog to win the Big 12. We'll see what Utah has to say about that. But again, with the best running back in college football, who knows? You can go anywhere with him. Kansas State 18, I would say maybe rank them a little bit higher. I'm fine with that. Miami at 19, I've heard mixed reviews. They've got a young but talented team. But I know, last season when they had that big kind of like choke of a loss where they should have nailed it and then they ended up losing at like a last-second play, I feel like that kind of threw them off for the remaining part of the season. Miami, I think, could be hit or miss. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they were to fall outside the top 25 or be a top 10 team. So we'll see how that goes. Texas A&M at 20. I'm okay with Arizona at 21. Kind of cool to see. Well, now a Big 12 team, but it's kind of cool to see a little bit of the West Coast representing. Kansas at 22. I like Jalen Daniels a lot. He's a top 10 quarterback for me this year. Devin Neal, the running back, I have high expectations for. Kansas should be pretty good. USC at 23, I'm okay with. Obviously, losing Caleb Williams sucks for their offense, but I'm confident Lincoln Riley is going to take that program and have them competing for a Big Ten championship. NC State at 24 is fine. Iowa at 25. Iowa's going to have one of the best defenses. Offensively, I would hope they improve from last season. But I wouldn't be surprised if they have a lot of, games where, a lot of 13-10 wins or, 17-14 or 17-10 or, 16-9, low-scoring wins like that. Teams who just missed the cut. Louisville's up there, Virginia Tech up there, Boise State, SMU, Iowa State. I'm all fine with those teams missing the cut. Now let's go into a deep dive of the Minnesota Gophers and the St. Thomas Tommies football schedule ahead for the 2024 season. We're going to start with my Tommies. I'm a Tommie alum. Got to start with them first. So they have their first game, Thursday, August 29th. Just a little preview, too. I will have a player interview releasing that Thursday morning, August 29th, before their first game. So I'm really looking forward. I have not conducted that interview yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. I think we record tomorrow. So it's going to be a great time. Langston Robinson is going to be the player you get to hear about. So they play a home game. They got a lot of home games this year. Three of their four non-conference home games or 3 of their 4 non-conference games are at home. They play Division II Sioux Falls at 7 p.m. Well, St. Thomas, from what I know, a couple seasons ago in 2022, they won the Pioneer League. They finished top 25 in the FCS rankings. Then last year, they had those similar expectations, I would say. And unfortunately, in my opinion, I would say maybe the season didn't go as well as planned. Still a phenomenal season, winning record, second in conference, which was great. But this year, I worry a little bit. Last year they played Black Hills State, who they play in mid-September. And although it was a win, it was definitely a little closer than I think people expected. Sioux Falls, I would imagine it's a win. I mean, St. Thomas has the longest winning streak for home games in all of Division I football. So I'd imagine they're going to take an opening win here, which I'll be excited about. And then they have an uphill battle, I would say. The next week, Saturday, September 7th, which is a game I plan to go to. Really looking forward to that one. They play the University of Northern Iowa, which is a program that is a scholarship program. For those who may or may not know, St. Thomas, being a part of the Pioneer Football League, that is a conference that does not support athletic scholarships. And St. Thomas, for their football program, unfortunately, unable to hand out like full athletic scholarship rides. They're like full ride scholarships basically, which can be difficult in the recruiting process. To want to encourage players to come play for your program and still having to pay tuition. So Northern Iowa being a program where they can offer players full ride scholarships generally can recruit players who might be a little bit better, whether they're transferring or whether they're coming out of high school. But it's going to be a fun one. St. Thomas, they have home field advantage. They played a few seasons ago. St. Thomas did lose down in Iowa, but I know it was a close game for a while, and I think this year they're going to be ready and better and more improved. So I'm really looking forward to that one. They play Black Hills State, who was a team they played last year. They had a 10-point win, and then they finish off their non-conference schedule at Lindenwood, which is going to be interesting. Lindenwood, they play number 22 Kansas. Lindenwood is a pretty tough schedule ahead. And then they come to the Pioneer Conference League. They start out hosting Stetson out of Florida. And then they have a couple of road games at Marist going out east, and then Valparaiso. They host San Diego, which has always been a solid team in the Pioneer League. I'm really looking forward to watching that game. I feel like every game they've played so far in the Division I era for St. Thomas has been fun and close games. Then they go at Morehead State. They host Drake, which is, I think, maybe possibly a little bit of a rivalry there, the Minnesota-Iowa rivalry. Then they go to Butler, who, if I'm not mistaken, I think might be the favorite to win the conference this year. I think they received some votes, or at least one vote, to be in the top 25 for FCS programs. And then they finish off their final game of the season hosting Dayton. So that is their schedule. Let's go over my opinion. So we're going to kind of go. So this is what I want to do. We are going to go with, first of all, my overall prediction, but then I'm also going to talk to you about my absolute ceiling and then my floor as well for the Tommies. And then we're going to do this for the Gophers as well. So I'll kind of give you, again, just an example. Let's just say I predict them at, having 9 wins. My ceiling would be, well, do I really think they can win more? The floor would be, well, is it possible they win less? Anyway, I hope that makes sense to you all. So the first game, home against Sioux Falls. I'm going to take the W. I think, they're going to be ready for the season. Sioux Falls, not a super far travel, but I do think that's going to have some impact. I know it might rain on Thursday. I was looking at the weather for St. Paul's, trying to go to the State Fair again on Thursday with some buddies, and I saw it was going to rain down there. So that might be a possible rainy game, which could be a game in the trenches. But I'm going to take the Tommies. They've got, in my opinion, one of the best offensive lines in FCS football. experienced, big, strong list of ton of talented players. I'm really looking forward to their offensive line and the run game this year. So I think they take a win week 1. Week 2, they host Northern Iowa. I think it's going to be a close game, but ultimately the Tommies have not seen a ton of success so far against programs who offer their players scholarships. I will regretfully say they take their first loss, which will be their first loss at home in years. They've held that record for as long as before I was even a student there. And I graduated back in 2023. So it's been a little bit. But I'm going to say they're going to lose against Northern Iowa. So they're going to move to 1-1. I think they beat Black Hills State. That's 2-1. I think they go to Lindenwood, have a close one, but I'm going to give them a road win there, make them 3-1, and then non-conference. So 3-1, I have them in conference. That's my overall prediction. I think they beat Stetson at home, so they move up to 4-1. At Marist, at Valpo, I'm going to give them those wins, so that's going to be 6-1. I think they beat San Diego at home, so that's 7-1. At Morehead State, 8-1. I'm fine with that. Hosting Drake, I think, is going to be really tough. It's going to be probably the second closest home game they're going to have this season, but I'm going to give them the edge in a win. So that's, 9-1? And then at Butler, I do think they're going to fall to Butler, 9-2, and then they finish it off with a win against Dayton at home, 10-2. So they play 12 games, right? Let me just make sure I'm counting. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. 10-2 is my predicting record. Do I see any of a ceiling? Is it possible for them to go 12-0? Absolutely. They're a team full of talent. They have a lot of guys stepping up. I know they've had some key losses to guys who have transferred to other programs since a season ago. However, I think a lot of guys are going to step up. They still bring back a lot of experience on both sides of the ball. I think the absolute ceiling really is 12-0. I know that is pretty far-fetched, and I think for really any team, no matter the schedule, that is tough to win all 12 games, but I definitely think they are good enough to go to Butler and win, and then, keep that at-home winning streak alive and beat Northern Iowa. That's the absolute ceiling, is 12-0. I have them projected at 10-2. Now, let's talk about the floor. I could also see a universe where they lose at Lindenwood, which would then bring them down to 9-3. On top of that, I could see them losing a home game either to Drake or San Diego. Maybe that if they were to lose to Northern Iowa, they would maybe that would throw them off a little bit and maybe feel like home games don't matter to them as much. That's maybe a possibility, right? So I could see them maybe dropping a game to San Diego or Drake. So I think the absolute floor for the Tommies this year is 8-4. My projected, oh my God, I'm spacing out. I can't think of the word. My projected win-loss record. Oh my goodness, it's been a long day. I'm sorry. I'm still kind of in a food coma. At the state fair, I had a ton of food. I had a chocolate malt. I had a turkey sandwich. That was really good. I'm not a big turkey guy. And then I also had some deep fried pickles, the Cajun pickles with they're not Cajun pickles, but they're Cajun battered with some hot sauce. Those were phenomenal. They were bussing. Anyway, enough about food. Record, yes. Absolute floor 8-4. My projected record 10-2. The highest ceiling possible, I do think, is realistically 12-0. I could see them beating all of these teams. So that is going to be my prediction for the St. Thomas Tommies. Now let's go to the Gophers. We have not talked too much about the Gophers. I'm a big Gopher guy. Again, kind of the big boy program out of Minnesota, out of the Big Ten. I think my overall thoughts for the Gophers, much love for them. I'm never going to wish them to lose unless if they were to somehow play St. Thomas one year, which I don't see happening in a very long time. As much as I would love to see it, I just don't think it's going to happen. But otherwise, I'm going to always go for the Golden Gophers. They have a fairly tough schedule ahead. They face 4 preseason ranked opponents. And I'm a little bit worried for the Gophers this year. I think they've had some good seasons under PJ Fleck, who I'm a big fan of. I have a signed Gopher jersey by PJ Fleck. I'm a big fan of his. If I can get him on the show, I would love that. I'm trying to get Glenn Caruso of St. Thomas on the show just for a little bit. If I can get PJ Fleck, that would be awesome. Someone make that happen, please. Let's do it. Big fan of PJ Fleck, but unfortunately, I think this might be his worst year ahead as the head coach for the Minnesota Golden Gophers. So let's just do a quick preview. They host North Carolina, the Tar Heels. Amarian Hampton, first-team All-American running back. He'll have a big season ahead. Then they host Rhode Island, Nevada, and Iowa. So 4 home games to start the season. They have a lot of home games. Then they travel to Michigan late September. And then they host USC the following week at home. They go down to LA to play UCLA mid-August or October. Then they have a bye week. They host Maryland late October, and then they have a few weeks, a couple more Big Ten teams. Illinois, which is going to be an away game, and then at Rutgers as well. Their last home game of the season, they get to host Penn State, which is going to be a really fun game to watch. And then they battle for the Axe at the Badgers for their final game of the season, rivalry week. That's the preview of the schedule. Again, we're going to go my realistic ceiling, my projection, and the floor. North Carolina is going to be an interesting one. Beginning this season, I always thought, this should be an easy win for the Tar Heels. Minnesota comes in on this game a -1.5 for the spread. For those sports bettors who care. But then I think it's interesting where Minnesota, in the Vegas books, Minnesota's projected to win. It should be a close game, right? It could be a difference of a field goal. But then of course you go to the matchup predictor on ESPN, and I don't know, if many of you really like to look at that, but the analytics show that UNC's the projected winner in this game. So I think that's always kind of funny, where it's like you have the 2 projections people like to look at, the spread and then the analytics. Vegas thinks Gophers by 1.5. So basically, 2 points they're projected to win by. And then you have the analytics showing that they have the Tar Heels taking an away game away. Right now I have to go North Carolina. I'm just not confident enough in the Gophers to win their first game as much as I want them to. I definitely plan to watch some of that as well. Their next game, they host Rhode Island. That should be a solid win. Then they host Nevada, which I think should be a win as well. So that brings them to 2-1. They host Iowa. PJ Fleck has struggled against Iowa. They host them at home. Iowa, again, I think this is going to be one of those games, especially with the Gophers offense. I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball much against Iowa. This could be one of those games that's like 7-6, 10-7, 13-7. It could be one of those ugly games. But I do got to give Iowa the win, so they advance to 2-2. At Michigan is going to be tough. I don't see them winning that one at all. They drop to 2-3. Then they host USC. Again, preseason ranked 23 at the current moment. I think they drop to them as well. That's 2-4. I think they're going to go to UCLA and lose that one as well. 2-5. That's my prediction. I think they do get a home win against Maryland. So it's going to be 3-5. At Illinois is going to be tough, but I think they take that one as well. So that's 4-5. At Rutgers is going to be lost. I basically have them losing the rest of the season. So at Rutgers, home against Penn State, and then at Wisconsin. So what is that? 4-8, right? They play 12 games. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Yes, 4-8. 4 wins coming against Rhode Island, Nevada, Maryland, and Illinois. That is my projection. We'll start with the ceiling. They definitely could beat North Carolina. So we'll add that one to the list. We'll give them Rhode Island and Nevada, so that's 3-0. A win against Iowa would be tough. I would cry if the Gophers started out 4-0 this year. I know they don't have super high expectations, but I'm rooting for them. But if the Gophers were to start out 4-0, that would be amazing. It's possible. And again, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, the absolute ceiling here. I'm going to give them 4-0. At Michigan, I am sorry. I just don't see it happening. So they will lose to Michigan 4-1, 4-2 against USC. They advanced to 5-2. I could see them winning at UCLA. Maryland 6-2 at Illinois, 7-2. Rutgers, I don't see them winning that game. That's going to be tough. So that's 7-3. Then they lose to Penn State for sure. Wisconsin, that's what, 7-4. Wisconsin's an interesting one. I think most people would agree the Badgers heading into the season are the better team. However, when it's rivalry week, regardless of record, both teams are going to give it their all. It's a game that really means something to the players, maybe more than some of these other games. So that's where it's really either way. And I'm going to give them, the Gophers could definitely beat Wisconsin. There's been years where Wisconsin, I think, was probably higher ranked than the Gophers, and the Gophers ended up winning the game. So what would that be? 8-4, right? Yeah, 8-4. I think I said 7-5 just a moment ago. So yeah, excuse me. 8-4. That's my absolute ceiling. So yes, my projection, 4-8. Ceiling 8-4. If we're gonna go to the absolute floor for the Gophers this season, would be a loss to North Carolina, a win against Rhode Island and Nevada. And honestly, I think if you really wanted to go, bottom floor, they would lose all Big Ten games, which I don't see really happening. This is just like, shit hits the fan for the Gophers. They would go, 2-10. So yeah, 2-10, absolute floor, worst season possible. 4-8 is my projected record. 8-4 if they're just actually having, if they're really exceeding expectations. But again, all love for the Gophers. One thing I always like to promote is just positive, but truthful media. I'm one of those guys where I really dislike when media is out there trying to bash someone or bash a program, and maybe make things look different than they are. So just for you all to know that I try to be honest and truthful, and I like to state my opinion. However, I'm always about positive love, and again, it's nothing but love for the Gophers. But I don't think it's a hurtful take to say the Gophers, I think, will probably struggle this season. But again, all love for the Gophers. I hope they do well. It would be awesome if they were to even have 6-6, maybe finish 500. 7-5 would be pretty cool. Came over 500. I would love that. But yes, overall predictions. Again, just to recap: Minnesota at 4-8, St. Thomas Tommies 10-2. I think the Tommies definitely have a chance to win the Pioneer League. Unfortunately, the Tommies, I'm pretty sure, are still with that, in my opinion, dumb NCAA rule where if you're new to Division I, you can't actually compete in any sort of playoffs. So unfortunately, even if the Tommies were to win the conference, they cannot represent the Pioneer League in the FCS playoffs. 2 seasons ago when they won back in 2022, I'm pretty sure Davidson College had to represent the Pioneer League despite finishing in second place. Which, again, I think that's a rule where a lot of people don't like it. And I'm not afraid to say it. I dislike that rule. I see it as, if you're new to the league, why not compete, right? It's not going to hurt. And if you earn it, right, if you enter Division I, if you start really dominating, so what? It's like, let them play. So, yes, that is all I have for you guys on this episode. It's kind of a short but sweet one. So, yeah, we've gone over the AP Top 25. We have gone over the St. Thomas Tommies schedule. We have gone over the Minnesota Gophers schedule and my predictions, ceilings and floors for the 2024 season. I'm ready for the season to continue. Again, I know we already kicked off just yesterday, but I'm excited for week 1 to start and for all the teams to be playing every week. It's going to be a great season. Tune in next episode. Again, I do have a one-on-one conversation with Langston Robinson from the University of St. Thomas Tommies, previewing their first game and the rest of the season. And then following next Monday's episode will be a one-on-one conversation with my dear friend Jackson James. We will go over some fantasy football in the NFL. I know we focused a lot on college, but we're going to take a break from that and discuss fantasy football for those who love that. And I know that season's coming up pretty quickly. I just had a draft yesterday, actually. I got to do an auction draft. Those are really fun. If you're in a league and you're looking to try something new, an auction draft can be really fun. They take a while. It took us about 3 hours to execute that bad boy. It was long, but it's really fun. So if you guys are in the fantasy football and looking to try something new, give it a try. It's really fun. How it works is simply you start out with an X amount of fake dollars. So we do $200 and you bid on players like an auction. Guys like Christian McCaffrey this year might go for $60 or $70. I think it's interesting where there's a lot of guys you overpay for, but then there's also plenty of guys who underpay for as well and get good value for them. It was really fun. But my most important draft comes out next Saturday, and I know then soon after there will be it'll be a big drafting week for those fantasy footballers. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up here. Thanks for watching episode 4, season 1 of the Inside Scoop podcast. Again, I'm your host, Julian Lockhart. Have a good night, everybody. So long, and be great.